now that we've switched from phone to Skype, there must be something about the Skype format, because we spoke with Jamie Glazer from John Anderson, Jean-Luc Ponty band a couple interviews ago, and he got his guitar out during a song break, and you seem to have picked up an SG. You got this?
Yeah. My guitar repair guy is here. Ulrich Salazar is making these beautiful again, and they needed it. I think he was filing some frets, and this is playing better now than it was.
Well, I saw a human figure in the distance behind you there. So
yeah, that's Ulrich. He's actually coming on tour with us, which is a great relief, and he will be a great asset to have out there.
Are you going to treat us to some playing?
Oh no, I wasn't going to do that. I just he was just having me check it out to make sure it was cool. And it is.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because we're talking Beatles, and of course, all that Let It Be era. You know, think of George Harrison playing his red SG.
Did he have a red SG? I don't remember that.
Yeah, I think he had a Telecaster, but I remember him playing it. Or maybe I'm thinking of the White Album. And maybe even Revolver. Hell, I don't know. I've seen him holding one before. Well, yeah, that was another great track. And, you know, as we prepare to wind down here and close this thing out, I have one more thing I'd like you to listen to and comment on. It's not another Voice from Christmas Past.
Oh, good.
Like the others. It's musical in nature. So if you don't mind, just give it a listen and then, you know, just share with us your first impressions of it. So how does that grab you?
That's it sounds like. Did you get somebody to phone that one in too?
Well, that track is called As Is. It's from an album called Eclipse by a pianist named Russ Lossing.
Wow.
What do you think about that when you hear it?
It's pretty wild. Very adventurous.
Okay, well, I figured you'd be polite. You want to hazard a guess as to the identity of the individual who wanted me to play that for you?
No.
Oh, that's interesting in and of itself. I knew this whole segment would be interesting. If you need a hint, it rhymes with Tim Weird.
Yeah, well, of course. It wouldn't surprise me that Jim would. Yeah, is that his idea?
Yeah, well, when I saw that Frank, Dennis, and Jim were the core musicians on the project, I dropped them all a line, offered them a chance to mess with you a little bit. Interestingly, while Frank and Dennis chose to mess with you verbally, you know, Jim decided to mess with you musically.
Yes.
I was a little unsure myself, both how he felt about that music and how he was expecting you to feel about it. Honestly, it just sounds like a bunch of random notes to me. So the emotional impact for me is nil, but I can see the potential for an intellectual impact. Because one of his comments was, yeah, it sounds like random notes, but you know, that guy is better at playing random notes than I am, says Jim, which is an interesting take. Because if you sit down there and you're supposed to just play, you know, spontaneous, weird stuff, is one person better at it than another?
Well, I mean, you know, Jim can do that, actually. It's a little different. It didn't sound like Jim to me. I've heard Jim do that, and he can have a lot of fun doing that. But no, and I can see. I mean, there's some. You can hear some sort of design and some sense in that. But it's pretty far away from from where I live comfortably musically. So,
Even those 1970s DJs we were talking about probably weren't going to touch that. I'd forgotten about this, but back when I went to Sacramento City College in the music labs, there was like these rooms with pianos, and there was a guy in there who would always play like Beethoven. He always had to have the sheet music. He was really good, and then I'd be like playing in another room, like improvising. So I was impressed that he was a good technician. He was impressed that I could play with no music in front of me. But one time I heard this god awful noise coming out of one of the rooms. And I looked in there, and there was this dude, sort of like husky dude with a beard. He just had the most contented look on his face, and he was just like pounding on the instrument as if he knew how to play. So he had the spirit, but he had no knowledge of how to play the piano. So what I was hearing was not quite what we heard. There was some intelligence too. This was almost like your kid just. But the thing that was different was he was like, his hands were flowing, and in his mind, he was playing something beautiful.
right.
But for everybody else, not so much. Well, Jim is a very sophisticated musician, of course, so he's not going to have the same taste as an average player. But, did you ever see an Albert Brooks movie called Defending Your Life?
No.
He's in purgatory, and, he meets all of these incredibly smart people, and they're really into eating food that tastes terrible. Because they have such a high degree of sophistication, that they like altering their senses or something. But he takes a bite of it, and it literally tastes like crap. It leaves the rabble scratching their heads. But I think that Jim's main point was when we encounter something unfamiliar that isn't what we're used to or what we expect it to be, we have a tendency to be dismissive of it. Like, I don't understand what this is, so therefore it sucks, which is an interesting concept because I think he's right about that.
Yeah, well, it's a mistake to sort of be dismissive. Always better to try to have an open mind. There's no question certain work and usually complex or sophisticated work will also often take a long time and a lot of work on the part of the listener to really get, and I mean, I remember this being true with a lot of early 20th century music. I mean, I remember studying Webern and Schoenberg, and I remember being assigned by a theory teacher to memorize like a Schoenberg piece. And we were going to be tested by writing a portion of it out or something. We'd have to have it really in our heads, and we had to really memorize it. It was difficult, but I remember that track. It was one piano piece, I think, and or maybe piano and vocal, and piano and soprano or something. And it was one of many pieces from the same larger work on a record that I had, and it's funny, but to this day, even many, like this many years later, if I put that record on, it all sounds like gibberish until that one track that I had to memorize and really got to know well comes, and then it's lighting up all the neurons, and I'm going, I have all these responses of recognition and enjoyment, and say, oh yeah, it did that, oh cool, because it's familiar to me, and I'm not sure that I really ever understood it in any kind of academic or intellectual way, but just the sheer repetition of it and getting it in my head to where it was familiar now rings all those bells again when I hear it, even years later. So there's just something about spending the time, which is going to sort of get you inside something that you might, routinely dismiss if it's, if you heard it the first time. On the other hand, life is short, and when you know what you like, and you want to sort of inhabit your own sort of personal, universe aesthetically. I mean, I think that's totally okay, and there's plenty of room to work within certain parameters and certain boundaries and certain styles. But always nice to be challenged.
Yeah, that's all very, very interesting. So I'm glad he contributed that. But, there's also going to be an occasional emperor's new clothes situation, where something is presented as, let's say, abstract art, and you're called a peasant if you don't understand it. But the person may not actually be talented, and they're trying to cover for their lack of talent by doing something strange because it's all they can do. So there's that too. Yeah,
I mean, I do prefer. I have to say, my taste runs towards things that are clearly, I like the way, I'm kind of a classicist, I guess, that way. I like the way music has been made, for the last several hundred years, and I mean, even though I'm a big fan of improvising, I tend to like the the sort of my tastes kind of fit with the center of most of the traditions. Like in jazz, I love everybody who are the acknowledged greats. More than the radical sort of like outsider types. I mean, I'm right in the center. I mean, and I pretty much like that with all my music. I mean, there's something. I mean, I think basically a lot of the consensus is there for a reason. And yeah, I mean,
You have nothing to apologize for.
No, I mean, I like it there, and I'm sure my music making reflects that. But
there's nothing to say that you can't go play doctor's orders and go home and play anything you want, or listen to anything. There's no limitations. But
I'm a big wide listener too. I mean, I really do love listening to a pretty wide range of stuff.
But yeah, that's interesting what you said about having played something, because when I listened to Led Zeppelin, a lot of that stuff I learned how to play on guitar, and a lot of that stuff I performed. Likewise, Rush or Beatles, and yeah, when you hear it and you have a memory of actually learning it and performing it, it does sort of give it another twist. And just like I would imagine somebody who had to learn, some kind of Rachmaninoff or something, or there's a lot of Chopin I played, and there's a lot that I didn't. So, yeah, well, that's great. Well, the good news is apparently you and Jim are going to be spending about 6 weeks on the Steely Dan tour bus together. So you have plenty of time to sort that all out. I don't get the sense he was particularly in love with it either as his go-to music. I think his word was curious.
I'd be willing to bet. No, I know Jim's taste very well, and in large measure, it's very similar to mine. But I think he works a little harder at trying to sort of listen. I think he does more digging, than I do. He's just interested, I think, and that's great. And I'm sure that's where he discovered that track.
Well, it was interesting because I told him, he could do an audio clip. He could just send a written thing. I could read it to you. And he sent me some music, and he said, play him this and don't tell him it's from me. So that was pretty cool. So again, I want to thank Jim Beard for that contribution. Thanks also to Frank Pagano and Dennis Espantman for their contributions. Extra special thanks to Susan Johnson for all that she does. I gave her a chance to chime in too. She goes, nah, he hears enough from me already. And of course, I have to thank Tom Bowers for engineering and editing the show. The track I'm going to close with is actually not on the new album. This one dates back a little further. It's got an interesting story attached to it. I was driving around town, blasting this particular tune because, frankly, I blast all my tunes. I was stopped at a light, and I noticed, say, in his 40s, African-American guy in the car next to me. He was like really rocking out to the music in his car. Then I realized he was actually rocking out to the music in my car. And then this happened again on another occasion. So I started to do it deliberately. I'd pull up to a red light or a stop sign, take a look around, lower the window a little bit, and then play the tune just to see what reaction I'd get. Sure enough, whether it was teenage skateboarders, an old lady at the bus stop, whoever it was, I always seem to get a positive reaction because it has all the elements people like to hear. It's funky, yet rocking, jazzy, but accessible. Tune I'm talking about, by the way, is Shine, Shine, Shine.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I just wanted you to know that in the demographic of random people on the streets of Phoenix, you're really crushing it.
Very good.
Yeah, well, John, on behalf of my listeners and myself, I want to thank you for Skyping in today and telling us about your new album. I hope Dennis is wrong and you sell 1,000,001.
I hope so, too. Thanks, Dan.
For more information, I encourage everyone to check out John's official website, jonherington.com, JONHERINGTON. I mentioned those Steely Dan reviews. One of them had John, JOHN. One of them had 2 R's in Harrington. So only one of them, really did it. But yeah, jonherington.com. After you buy your adult entertainment, be sure to check out his tour dates, both with and without Steely Dan. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And now, as promised, from Time on My Hands, this is Shine, Shine, Shine. So long, everybody.